be listening to Father Giovanni Grosso and Francesco Trentini, who will be presenting the topic theoretical and practical proposals for a reinterpretation from a testimonial perspective of the artistic and cultural heritage of a community of consecrated life. The title, From the Artefact to the Inculturation of the Charism in the Carmini and the City Project. Father Giovanni Grosso and Francesco Trentini are both belonging to the... One is Giovanni Grosso is actually from the Institutum Carmelitanum, and Francesco Trentini comes from the University of Ca' Foscari, Venice. You can see their CVs online, and you can also read the CV on your phones, so you can access the internet and also look at the presentation or the abstract, actually.
Buongiorno.
So good morning. Good morning to you all. We thank the organizers of this conference for having accepted and welcomed our proposal. You can see the heading is a quite complex heading that wants to summarize what we want to offer, which actually keeps in mind everything that has already been said up to now, both in the message of the Pope as well as by the other speakers, especially by the presentation of Monsignor Carvalho, and the general framework within which we are somehow navigating. Our presentation wants to offer a few items that have come out from the theoretical and methodological debate within the institutional project of the Carmelitan project in collaboration with the Venice University of Ca' Foscari, which is a project called Carmini and the City Project that lasted between 2013 and 2019. So the results of this project were reported in a book of Francesco Trentini entitled "To Be Elsewhere," that was published in Milan by the Unicopli Editing House in 2019. Now, this project is a response to is the response given by the is a response that we want to give to the management of the cultural heritage of the church, and especially thinking about the Christian community, being aware that identifying new strategies, new management strategies of our goods require new methodologies and new research methodologies on our ecclesial goods. And it's on this behalf that trying to respond to the invitation of the Pontifical Commission in order to reconstruct or rebuild the social and cultural history and the stratification, cultural and religious realities of the past. We have drafted an iconological paradigm which is contextualized on the specific problems that have been identified by the Carmelitan Artistic Heritage Commission, focusing especially on the state of the Church Santa Maria del Carmine in Venice, which is a Carmelitan church since the 14th century, and also the beginning of the Carmelitan province in Venice from 1742 until the Napoleonic suppression. Now, I would like to give the floor to Professor Trentini to introduce us more in detail the project and the proposal that we have for you. Thank you. Good morning. I also want to express my gratefulness for the invitation and this opportunity. So from the beginning, we had to face the traditional identity approach of the historical studies of the communities of consecrated life, and we saw that in this there was a risk represented by the application of an identity concept that was quite strict and rigid, that would have made us read the different episodes of regular life as particular cases of the theoretical model of reference presented by the norms and laws of the order. Now, we understood that in this way we would have lost the identity or the dynamic, the real dynamic of the consecrated life that we were studying, and in order to carry out a methodological different approach inspired by the proposals of the lived religion theory, we wanted to pay attention to the concrete ways of religious life that were expressed by individuals and their communities. So it was about turning around this perspective, historiographical perspective, to look at the existing documents and to look in those documents about concrete difficulties that the Christian community had in those centuries and those times. So this made for this. In synthesis, this made for the brothers to understand for us to understand how those brothers and sisters were sons and daughters of a founder or founders who had a role of incarnating the charism, and this nuances were a way to identify perspectives and also objectives and desires that would help us to qualify as habitus. So the objective of study would have been the way in which those elements operating as a structured structure and structuralizing structure would just shape up the acts of the Dominican, of the reality of the congregation in Venice. So the change of paradigm of the Carmelitan congregation also changed the plastic reality that we had of the life of the religious man in that time, also in relation with other individuals and other groups that could not be understood outside an intense social dynamic, and not only for practical reasons or financial reasons. What the documents told us was that there were different movements that were called the religious field, field of management of spiritual and social life of a group that is characterized by frictions, by problems and conflicts, but also solutions that are achieved through the dynamics of the subjects involved. Now, studying this cultural and artistic heritage brought us to a question: how can we value all those goods in ecclesial reality? It was not sufficient to value them or consider them as a response to a spirituality that was only considered from a general perspective. I apologize. I should move forward. So, for example, this is in the Carmini church. So, El Carmine of Venice, the church of El Carmine in Venice. So here we have the Carmelite, shows the Carmelitan devotion to the scapulary, which is something that is presented in an iconographic way that shows the circumstances in which this happened, and also the expectations of the community, of the Carmelitan community, had when it came to the painter. So this is also reflecting the context that is very important for the catalogization of the cultural goods. And this, however, we have been of very little help, because the art in itself wouldn't help us recognize the good as an expression of the dynamics on the field. It would make us instead speak about a physical or anthropic context that was part of an autonomous existence that was helpful and capable of making us understand how the good have been, the value of the good. So this leads us to an iconographic understanding of this artwork and how this had a role. So we found the importance of the heritage of the order and this relationship with the laity in connection with the Council of Trent. That was a confraternity that was experimental in that time. It was back in 1544, so it was the first time that such a situation happened in Venice, and we found our personal commitment. We found in here the personal commitment of Lorenzo Laureto, who was the one who was renovating a new iconographic idea connected with the scapulary. And in it, we also found elements that were connected with a jurisdictional contrast between the order and the Republic of Venice, seen within the reality, the religious reality. And based on the documents we had, this work of art also was a representation of symbols and of realities that the Carmelitans and the lay who were connected with them had turned to because of certain problems in order to give to life a certain religious way.
So, for example, the in the Pushkin Gallery in Rome, a group of Carmelite friars, including Frate Angelo, brought about a pillar after the death of Father Serveo. So they took forward the worship of the Holy Cross on the wavelength of the renewal produced by Jean Souret. And so therefore they focused on Venetian. As you can see, there is the Mameluke figures which are evident in this image. I have to be very brief because it's a very complex study. But I must address the objectives we have. What is most interesting in perspective? The cataloging the objects in a community isn't just to communicate catechetical information, but in the context of the habitus in their life concerning a real reality of testimony, of witness, because the conveying the gospel isn't only concerning things, but generates life, facts, and a change in life. Therefore, art within consecrated communities is also a form of inculturation of the charism, considering the way that art is constitutive of a cultural and religious community and concerns human renewal through the incarnation of the Son of God. The inclusion of works of art within nuclei of lived life present important opportunities concerning debates ongoing in museum contexts recently concerning human dynamics out of which these works of art emerge. In this context, moving from aesthetics to anthropological circumstances and empathy, as Edith Stein understood it, understanding God as completely other to me in a phenomenological world different from mine, but in which it is possible to enter in a genuine exchange. So in the memory of these objects, we see the lived experience of the person in their empirical and spiritual reality, the discovery of new complex nuclei of spiritual and religious life, elaborated in symbolic ways through art in the two cases I quoted, show the capacity of the subject to grasp the life of the other, concerning the integral nature of others who are different from me but engage deeply with me. Cultural artistic experience can be identified as a response to the changes going on in society today, as has been discussed much in the last decade. Within the context of social media, we're ever more in search of lived experience, also within the context of art, works of art. We should be less art-centric and more anthropocentric, considering the spiritual faculties that people have. To give a practical outworking of what has been said thus far, we have the digital resource that can enable the user to reach the witness of Carmelite communities, to connect with the witness of Carmelite communities. Thus, the idea arose of the Universal Carmelitanum Museum. This is the front page, which is just a draft now of a reality which is coming into being. It's still a project in which we can unpack the heritage of Carmelite cultural assets in connect with the world of the laity and considering the cultural heritage of the order. It's not a question of a bank, but a virtual museum, as it has been understood, as it has been conceived, conveying cultural and spiritual goods. This is an illustration of a page within this museum, but as you can see, there is a complete image on the left, and then commentary, and a series lower down, close-ups of details with appropriate commentary, clicking on which then there are further pages for study. What we find interesting technically is the data will be made available through different means for key points directed towards directing attention from the artistic object towards the lived life explained in the work. The first category, relative, is to the historical circumstances, the general history of the order and of the locality, then concerning the use of that object in liturgical celebrations and specific festivities, then the topics conveyed in the image and within the religious context, and then the people and institutions engaged in the creation and conservation of the work. All this will be entrusted to professional staff coordinated by the Carmelitanum Institute that wishes this museum to be an opportunity to convey the charism through art and to locate the work of art through concrete people of a lived life and place. We try to have adequate terms in the, and using also the teaching of Pope Francis, but also considering the complete reversal and change that we are addressing in this meeting of what is actually going on with the consecrated life today, and the discovery of these nuclei of lived life can be a way of reviving and conveying the charism born and lived in other circumstances. But here we have a post-secular humanity still thirsting for dynamic human realities. Thank you.